Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are, in fact, free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and alongside John Macon Gillespie, the publisher, the head writer. What's your title at the Grove Report?
Publisher is the technical title, but I answer to just about anything that's said in my direction. So,
kind of the same way here as well. Well, fall camp is going on, and it is the only story that is going around Ole Miss sports right now. What is your impressions of fall camp, and what's been going on your end of the things, like the Grove Report reporting on?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are still focused on quarterbacks. Looking at social media, and that's not always a great indicator, but people really like quarterback stories, quarterback talk, regardless of whether there's a competition or not. So there's been a lot of that. And I feel like a lot of people already have their minds made up as to who they want, and they're backing that guy. I think the majority of them are backing one guy over another, but, it kind of is what it is. But, there's been, a lot of quarterback stuff with fall camp. That's going to be a big focus. Ayden Williams, who we'll kind of talk about here in a little bit, has really flashed based on stuff I've seen. It's been this time of year. It's not really slow anymore, but it's kind of a build up to the season a little bit as far as coverage is concerned. So it's always kind of an entertaining time to kind of get your, kind of get back in the groove a little bit for when the season rolls around.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's weird because everybody remembers the Matt Corral versus John Rice Plumlee situation. And even last year, the Jaxson Dart versus Luke Altmaier. And this year, it feels like it's on steroids. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's not necessarily Jaxson Dart versus Spencer Sanders. It's either pro Jaxson Dart or anti Jaxson Dart. It's weird.
Yeah, and I think the quarterback competitions you mentioned that we obviously remember in recent memory, most people who did some digging or looked at tape understood how those were probably going to come out. And I think that's kind of to an extent, how it is now. But also I think that people were either pro Jaxson Dart or anti Jaxson Dart at the end of the season last year. And I think that has just simply carried over until now, not taking into account any development that may have happened or any change, anything. I think people are kind of sticking to their guns, whether they're pro Jaxson Dart or anti Jaxson Dart. And I may be guilty of that myself, because to me, Jaxson Dart wasn't bad. Like I didn't think I thought he progressed as the season went on last year. And I think he's progressed even more this offseason. But it doesn't feel like a two camps thing between two different guys. It feels like, yes, either I want Jaxson Dart or I want anybody other than Jaxson Dart.
Yeah, the closest thing I can think to it is good Bo and bad Bo.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and that was highlighted throughout his entire collegiate career, I guess. So I mean that's really kind of the way it is. I mean, right now it's either you love him or you hate him. But I think when the season rolls around, a lot of that will die down, probably.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of, and this is not Ole Miss related, but it kind of reminds me of like social media on Tua. And that's a similar thing. There's people that when he came in the draft, they just made their opinion up right now that either he was or he wasn't going to be able to progress, and they've just been defending that originally take from the beginning.
Yeah, and not to get into a psychology thing, but I think that's kind of how people are sometimes anyway. Not just with football, but like if they have their minds made up, a lot of times they just stick with it, regardless of anything that changes. And I think I'm guilty of that as anyone. But I mean, it's definitely the case with quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. Well, speaking of quarterbacks, this isn't a situation in this camp of Jaxson Dart just being the best available. you actually have 3 or 4 quarterbacks that are playing pretty well. And Jaxson Dart just seems to be outplaying them at this point. And what do you think about the other guys in this quarterback room?
Well, I think that they each bring something different to the table. At the Grove Bowl, which I guess was my second or third time seeing Spencer Sanders in person, I was really impressed with his legs. Right, I mean he's fast. You could tell he wasn't 100% healthy, but he can sling it. But I do think that the other two guys, will be, you and I have said, are pretty much the future of the program. I mean, it's going to be one of those guys. And I think they are different quarterbacks, but in my opinion, I think that's what they're being molded for right now. I don't think that they are. Yes, I guess they're technically in the quarterback competition, but like at the same time, I don't think there's really many expectations for them to be the guy this year. But I in all of my years of following Ole Miss sports, I don't remember a quarterback situation like this, where there's, yes, there have been quarterback controversies, but not to the point where it was a quarterback controversy because everybody is talented. The closest thing I can think of is the early Orgeron years, like Michael Spurlock, kind of that era. But that wasn't because everybody in that room was just uber talented and definitely could play SEC ball. It's because, okay, who gives us the best chance to win? I think that in this room right now, I think all 4 guys either right now are ready to play SEC ball or in a year's time they will be.
Yeah, in my opinion, Walker Howard and Austin Simmons, they're already competing for 2024.
I agree.
That's what's going on right now. They're battling for that. They probably aren't going to win this year, but they're hoping that Jaxson Dart has a year where he throws for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns and goes pro.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And I think that I know people can get frustrated with quarterback controversies because fans like to unite behind their quarterback. They like to be fully invested in their quarterback. They like to know who their guy is. But at the same time, looking at it from an objective standpoint, in my lifetime, I think this is the best the Ole Miss quarterback room has ever been. I mean, in the deepest for sure. I mean, it's just I can't really think of a comparison where it's been this talented top to bottom.
The last time it was like this was like when Glenn Griffin and those guys were walking the halls back in the early 60s. That's the last time it was been this stacked.
Yeah, I mean, even Romero and Eli. I mean, you don't have much after that. I mean, now you have 4 guys who across the board, everybody says, not just me, these guys are talented and they can play.
You had a situation and for my entire life in the quarterback room, 8 out of every 10 years, when you're looking at it, if the starting quarterback gets injured, it's over. The season's done. Nothing happens. And those 2 years, there might have been a young up-and-coming backup that we could be at least excited about. But most of the time, it was kind of one and done. Now, honestly, 3 might not kill you this year.
Yeah, and I think, too, the time that comes to mind, like you've said, that maybe one of those 10 years where it wasn't exactly like that. Chad Kelly goes down in 16. Everybody's excited for Shea Patterson. He puts on a show at Texas A&M. Obviously, we know how all that ended. But, when Kelly went down and Patterson was announced as the guy, burning the red shirt at the time, I feel like that kind of energized everybody, at least for a week or two, that, hey, this may not be done. Obviously, again, we know how everything went, but yes,
State scored 55.
Yes, we do know to your point that most of the time, and it's not just Ole Miss. I mean, it's almost everybody where your starting quarterback goes down because so much of the offense runs through your quarterback that a lot of times you feel like it's done. But I don't think that's the case for Ole Miss this year.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, the guy that's been getting all the headlines this week is a newcomer, Ayden Williams. I saw him at the Under Armour All-American game and just looked out there, and he was one of the better players on the field, a terrific route runner, so smooth, great hands, doesn't fight the ball. You could see exactly how good he is. There was one rep in the game that it was a bad pass. He just absolutely cooked Cormani McClain, who was at that time the first or second rated player in the country. So the talent is there, and he is just absolutely just showing out in these early days of fall camp.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying in my mind that, Ayden Williams is going to be. He may not even be on national radars at times this year, but I do think that we're seeing flashes of what he is going to be if he remains healthy. Because obviously he can play ACC ball now. Like it's not an issue that he can see significant playing time now and be a big contributor in this offense. But a year or two down the line, it's only going to get better from here if he stays healthy. And yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed, and I know that a lot of the other guys have been too, just seeing what he has done and how he's flashed. And I thought it was really cool. The video the social media team tweeted out, I guess it was last week, of his touchdown pass from Jaxson Dart. His celebration at the end was really cool. I mean, he's kind of got that swagger about him a little bit already. And that's if you keep it honed in the right direction, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, Ayden Williams is 2016 AJ Brown. That's what we can expect this year from him. He's going to make some plays. He's going to flash.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember AJ's first touchdown, and
against Bama, right?
Yeah, and it was I could tell then. I was like, okay, this guy may not be the guy this year. Year or two down the line, he is the guy.
He's going to be the dude.
Yeah. So I mean, it's exciting if you're an Ole Miss fan at this point, seeing not just the quarterback room, but hey, you've got some future weapons out there too, and some current weapons, I guess, if you want to consider them that. But weapons that are here for the long haul, I should say.
This is a fun question that I'm about to ask you, but it might not be too fun, but it is, I don't know. It's a fan type thing that I have. All right. So Ayden Williams has been unbelievable through the first week of camp. Zachary Franklin cannot practice at the moment. He's going to, get integrated a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. At what point does Ayden Williams just become that number 2 guy?
Man, I think it would have to be, personally, I think it's like late August. Like I think they're going to kind of give it as much time as possible before that becomes the case. Again, I'm not inside the building, so I don't necessarily know that, but that would just be my gut reaction, that it would probably be late. I mean, a week or two before kickoff is what I would say, which, I mean, right now, today's August the 8th. So, I mean, that's just, a couple weeks down the road. But again, it's almost exactly like the quarterback situation. It's you don't take a really big step back, I don't think, just based on what we've seen so far, if he winds up being the number 2 guy, because he's going to be on the field anyway. I don't think that you drop off noticeably really, really big on offense if that's the case.
Yeah, and right before we get out of here, all this realignment that's been going on in college football with the Pac-12 essentially dead. It's like a Pac-4 now. And all of a sudden, Lane Kiffin's on a huge tweet storm and everything, giving his opinion all over about the welfare of student athletes having to travel for midweek games and all of this. And that's not what they signed up for. And let me point out, he is absolutely correct. I just don't know that that's why he's doing it. I think he found a way that he could be correct, but he's recruiting Chris Davis, who is committed to Stanford. I think he's recruiting the kid. There's another Stanford commit from Mississippi at the moment. I think Lane Kiffin is recruiting those guys, and this is just a way that, hey, you can just megaphone it out directly to your guy.
Yeah, and Lane is kind of a master at this a little bit, of playing the game within the game, not coming out explicitly and, just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, but playing the cards that he has dealt to his advantage. Okay. So seeing the national landscape, how things are changing. Okay. There's this guy who I think would be a really good fit at Ole Miss. who is committed to one of these schools who's affected by the situation, why not tweet about it? I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And yes, he is absolutely right about how things have gone with the Pac-12 and everything, and that could be a whole other show in itself. But yeah, I mean, we talked before I came on. It reminded me of 2 seasons ago when Arch Manning was in town and Ole Miss retired Eli's number against LSU and all that fun stuff. Had Manning in the end zones and everything, which to me was entirely a recruiting pitch to Arch. Ole Miss obviously didn't win that battle. They won the game. They didn't win the recruiting battle. But in the post-game press conference, Lane went on about, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes probably about how important the Mannings were to the university, how much they love the Mannings, et cetera, et cetera. And that to me is a recruiting pitch to Arch without ever saying his name. And it's kind of the same situation here. This can be a recruiting pitch to those guys without ever saying their name. It's just a way to kind of dance around it a little bit and, not be as obvious as to what you're doing.
Yeah. Whenever Lane Kiffin puts out an opinion and he says something that is going to make a lot of noise and that megaphone picks it up, the first question you need to ask is, how will this help him in recruiting? Because that's usually going to lead you to what the actual answer is.
Yep.
So anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John Macon Gillespie, publisher of the Grove Report. What do you got going on over there?
Well, we've got fall camp coverage going on. Obviously, I mean, there's little storylines, bits and pieces from interviews that we've kind of picked up. I did an entire story today on Jalen Knox's interview, but it wasn't from talking about the receiver room. It was actually his comments on the quarterback situation. So you can go check that out. I mean, we find these little pieces there and kind of, maybe try to read between the lines a little bit at this time of year. So it's a lot of fun. We've got a lot of great stuff going on over there. Ben King has been excellent being at fall camp and media day for us at the university. And, it's just a really good setup over there. So, I feel like we put out decent content.
Yeah, you do a fantastic job indeed. And anytime you can get free content, that's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care.